Hi everyone. In this lecture, I'm going to give you some things to keep in mind as you review the feedback that you've received on the rough draft of your essay, and you start thinking about how to take that feedback and translate it into meaningful revision. Now, this isn't going to be a comprehensive how-to presentation, merely a set of what I'm calling considerations to help you understand the difference between revision and editing and how you can take the feedback that you've received and make it actionable and significant to your work moving forward. Now, the first thing that it's important to keep in mind is the fact that revision has various levels, right? There's a big difference between higher order concerns, which I kind of describe as being most related to the content, the actual subject of what you're writing about. This is relevant to the genre in which you're writing, the particular prompts that you're working with. These are the things that make up the heart of your paper, the central argument, the way that you've developed your ideas, what kind of evidence you've used, and how you've gone about structuring your paragraphs. These are by and large higher order concerns because they have to do with what you're actually saying and what points you're trying to make. By contrast, lower order concerns are more related to editing. Now, editing is an incredibly important part of academic writing, but when it comes to the difference between sort of the heart of your paper and kind of the polish that you put on your paper, the biggest impact you can make as you revise your work is paying attention to how well your argument is functioning, how well your development the development of your ideas is working, and how you have organized, right? When you're dealing with maybe you're coming up against a deadline. If you are trying to figure out how you're going to budget your time will always be better spent on attending to these higher order concerns as opposed to simple editing. Now, after you've received feedback on your rough draft, there are some things that you need to do in order to put yourself in an open mindset in order to take that feedback and then translate it into sort of actionable revision in your own writing. The first thing I recommend that you do is carefully read all of the feedback that you've received. Read it carefully. Don't skim it. Make sure that you understand what is being said. And then you should reread your own work, your own essay with that feedback in mind. This will help you sort of kind of understand what you've written through the eyes of the people who are providing you with that feedback. And I think that this step, even though it's just a matter of reviewing your own work, I think it's a really important one because without it, you run the risk of proceeding through your revisions, thinking about an essay you think you wrote as opposed to the essay you actually wrote. So don't skip that step. The next thing that you should do, and in fact, I recommend that you sit down and you actually make a handwritten list. Look for any commonalities in the feedback that you've received. Of the various individuals who have read and responded to your work, have you noticed that they've said anything similar to one another? If you have more than one person pointing out your thesis and saying that it's not as clear as it could be, it's not as specific, maybe it's not focused in response to the essay prompt, then that's a pretty good indicator that that's a place you want to be paying special attention as you move forward. I also want you to make sure you are paying attention to your feedback in terms of the way your essay will be graded. If you haven't taken a close look at the grading rubric, right, the actual document against which your writing will be assessed, you need to make sure early on in your revision process that you have that rubric in front of you, that you open up a window so that you can look at the rubric while also looking at your work. Ask yourself as you take a look at the feedback that you've received, where am I most successful in terms of the grading rubric? What do I need to focus my attention on in terms of the breakdown of how my work will be graded? Where can I spend the time to make the biggest impact in terms of how successful my paper is? Those are kind of 3 stages of orienting yourself to the feedback that you've received that I think will help make you more open and more, let's say, sort of effective in implementing that feedback. I'm a big believer in the strength of paragraphs, and as you are revising your work, I want you to make sure that you are considering what each paragraph in your essay is doing, because a paper is very much like a machine in which every paragraph has a particular task that it needs to complete in order for the essay on the whole to function properly. Now, I won't embarrass myself by making a comparison to a car, because I'll tell you the truth, I don't know what the different parts of a car do. However, each thing needs to be operating the way it's supposed to in order for the car to run. Okay, so keep in mind, every paragraph ought to have a point, an illustration of that point, and an explanation of how the illustration supports the point. Now, I actually have a presentation titled Structuring Your Paragraphs that goes into this idea of point, illustration of point, and explanation in a good deal more detail. And so I highly recommend that you review that lecture video as well. At the end of the day, when you zoom in on your paragraphs, you should be asking yourself, what is this paragraph meant to prove? And how can my point be clearer to my reader who simply hasn't been thinking about the thing that I've been thinking about as I've been writing this essay? That is, at its heart, the goal of revision, to be reader-centered. What does it mean to be reader-centered? Well, think of it this way. As you've written your essay, as you've sat down, hopefully, I hope, in multiple sort of composition sessions over the course of a few days, you've been thinking deeply about the idea that you are seeking to communicate and submit, not only for this class, but also as sort of your contribution to the academic discourse around this particular idea. You've thought about this deeply. You know things that your readers don't know. That includes me. You need to walk me and any other reader of your essay through your ideas carefully, not because you should assume that we are uninformed or ignorant or stupid, right? It's a matter of making your point clear, because you need to show us the work that you've put in, the thought that you've sort of invested in your ideas, such that we understand and believe you, right? Without that effort, without that explicit written effort, we don't necessarily understand what it is you're saying. Please don't take for granted that we can read your mind. When I'm reading your essay at my desk by myself, I can't turn to you and say, well, what did you mean right here? Could you elaborate? All I have are the words on the page, and so you need to think about how you can be as reader-centered as possible, how you can put yourself in the shoes of your reader and think, what do they need in order to understand my ideas the way that I understand them? So I hope that this brief overview of how to approach revision helps support your work moving forward, and as ever, if you have any questions, let me know.